So welcome everyone to our session on exploring India's EQ paradox. Thank you for joining this evening. Very happy to have with me Jayne Morrison, who you may know as the 6 Seconds Regional Director from the Middle East, Africa and India. And you may know 6 Seconds, if you don't, very briefly. They are a not-for-profit who've been working in the space of emotional intelligence for over 25 years and do a lot of research and a lot of assessments in this space across over 140 countries and with over 500 million people having now completed their assessment. So thank you, Jayne, for being here. We also...
I'm looking forward to it.
Great. And we have Shakti Saran, who is a former corporate leader in the banking and finance space. He's a former senior fellow with a leading global NGO. And now he is the founder of Shaktify, which is a think tank and is focused on solving some of the world's most intractable problems using a systems thinking perspective.
Pleasure to be here today, Andrea. Thank you for having me, for inviting me to this session.
It's a pleasure to be with you both. And I'm Andrea Stone. I am an executive coach with a former marketing background in the technology industries, and I'm a preferred partner for 6 Seconds in India. So let's jump in and spotlight Jayne with a question, which is, what is emotional intelligence, or what is EQ, and why does it matter?
Looking at some of the people who've joined us this evening, I think we should ask them actually, Andrea. But as most of you know, I can see a big smile there, Vivek. Yeah, emotional intelligence is about blending our thinking and feeling to make better decisions, yeah, in life. So it's about accurately gathering emotional data and effectively using it in solving life's challenges. So essentially, it's about being smarter with feelings. And to answer the second part of your question about why does it matter, you just need to look at the World Economic Forum Future of Work report. And if you've not, I would encourage you to do so. To answer that question, in the top 10 skills that are needed for 2025, 8 out of 10 relate directly to emotional intelligence. So in order to succeed with these, emotional intelligence is a skill set that every person needs. And from our network, the research in our network, we know that there's a direct correlation between EQ and life success. In fact, our research shows that people who score above average in emotional intelligence are 10 times, 10 times more likely to have high scores in EQ, in life success. And life success, think about the skills for 2025. Yeah, those are all things that are going to help us move forward and solve the future challenges.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you, Jayne. So yeah, the World Economic Forum, skills for the future. And also skills for success. So thank you for your definition. And let's go to Shakti. So Shakti, we're going to ask you as a systems thinker, how does EQ contribute to systems thinking? What's the correlation?
Thank you, Andrea. So before I answer the contribution part on how EQ contributes, I think so that we're all on the same page of what systems thinking is and what systems science is. So if I may just take a minute on, establishing that understanding here with everyone who's on this call today. So firstly, system science is the study of interconnections between people, things, phenomena, ideas, just about everything. It's the science of understanding and unearthing interconnections. And systems thinking, as described by the renowned author Peter Senge, is understanding the consequences of one's own actions. And that when Peter refers to one, that could be me in my individual capacity or in my organizational capacity and a national role. So it's understanding the consequences of one's own actions, right? And systems thinking has been essentially, it has been derived from systems science and is used extensively across disciplines, across professions, for diagnosing problems at a systemic level. And it is multidisciplinary in nature, and the aim is to kind of address and get to the root causes of the problems. Yeah, it also has the potential, to build consensus, to unify, and it's used in, not just the corporate sector, but across the social sector, in government, and even professions like medicine and law. So its usage is it has the potential of being used very extensively. Now, I also want to state that systems thinking goes beyond problem solving because it extends to life itself. It has the potential for evolution and for development. And, to give it by way of an example, someone who's very strong on analytical thinking, who goes out to find beauty in the sunset, will only end up looking at the sun and the cloud and the sky and the Earth's horizon. Until that realization doesn't happen, that beauty is not a thing, but a special way of looking. Yeah, systems thinking will not settle into that person. So what systems thinking does is that it helps us build an accurate mental model of reality. And when we speak of mental models, we are referring to ideas, beliefs, concepts, and even facts that help us perceive the real world and describe that reality. But rarely do our mental models, mirror the reality that we are trying to describe. And this mismatch is the root cause of our wicked problems that we see on planet Earth, and also our stressful lives. So EQ is nothing but a measurement of my emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is my capacity to understand my own emotions. And this can help really in unearthing and addressing our biases, and thereby, improving our mental models of the systems that we are trying to study or that we are trying to, explain, or the problems that we're trying to solve. And EQ therefore helps us in making a more informed decision. It's a more informed sense of, how my actions impact others, and how is it, and how one can really actually improve that interaction, with others. That's how EQ really helps.
Okay, so I think building on from what Jayne and Shakti says, so Jayne's talking about blending the thinking and the feeling. I think also in a way, Shakti, you're saying systems thinking. Our brain is a system. There's different parts of our brain. We have the thinking part,
Right.
we have the feeling part. So how do we blend that to perceive more fully, I suppose, is what you're saying, and not suffer from tunnel perception in a way. So
Right.
I'm going to build on that and talk about, we said we'd talk about some of the research we did. So I just wanted to frame the research, that the research we did in India was among professionals. So everyone was a graduate or a postgraduate. So this is all professional people, 553 professionals, entrepreneurs, or people working at corporates or institutions responded to the 6 seconds emotional intelligence assessment. And from that, we got the findings that we're going to share with you. And so just to provide the context for understanding our brain as a system, we're going to look at our brain styles, which is a function of 3 things. Some of you may be familiar with that, but to make sure everyone's on the same page, I'm actually going to drag Jayne back to the camera, because Jayne's going to explain the 3 styles, and we'll start with focus. So there's 3 areas. The first is focus, Jayne. And this is animated, just so you know, but you carry on and then I'll just do the animation.
So when we did our research around brain styles, as many of you know, we found that there are 3 key areas that that develop into a style which is our preferred way of perceiving and processing the world. And this gives us an indication of how we are using our emotional intelligence. The higher our level of emotional intelligence, the more likely we are to be able to flex, in other words, to practice cognitive flexibility across these continuums. But most of us, in fact, all of us, have a preferred style. And the research also shows that as stress increases, that stress that's been around the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, finding work, finding business, we are more likely to retreat into our brain styles. So it's our first preference for dealing with things. And in order to be more flexible, we need to really practice the skill of cognitive flexibility. So the first of these strands is what we refer to as focus. And on the one extreme end is rational, and on the other side is emotional. So what does this mean? On the rational side, people's brain like data, rational data. And on the other side, people's brain tune in more easily to the emotional data. So just to give you an indication here, some of you who are more on the rational side might be focusing on the words I'm using, and need a lot of words, whereas others are focusing on the tone of my voice, my body language, and so on and so forth that are accompanying those words. So the one is much more focused on the actual data, the hard rational data, whereas the other side is focused on the emotions that are around that data. If you click forward, Andrea, and then just, so on the, if you fall on the very far extreme of rational, you tend to be data driven and ignore emotions, whereas if you fall on the other side, you possibly are more feeling oriented and possibly ignore some of the cognitive data around, because feelings, drive you.
And just in the middle, you could move both ways, right? You first consider the rational data, then also blend that with some feeling data, and vice versa, right?
Yeah. And there's a infinite number of possibilities as to where you can stand on this continuum. So, some of us tend to be more on one side, some of us tend to be on the other. And also our ability to flex ourselves cognitively across this is got a lot to do with context. Yeah, we might find in some contextual situations we're more rational and others more emotional. Something that's really important here, this is about data. Do our brains focus on rational data or emotional data? It does not have anything to do with behavior. And when people see this and find themselves having done the assessment that they're on the emotional side, on the rational side, but I'm not rational. Everybody tells me I'm very emotional. And the reason for that is often we show up emotionally because our brain does not agree, or is not getting the data that it likes. So then we behave because of the patterns we've developed in an emotional way. Yeah. So we must not confuse this strand with the way our brain focuses and our behaviors.
Yeah. Jayne, I'm just going to, because we're a cozy group here. Jayne, Kevin's just asked about the OVS. So just I don't know if you can see that. The OVS providing great data about systems thinking and EQ. Or maybe we just take that at the end, unless you want to handle that now.
No, I think let's refer to that because that's quite outside the box, and a lot of people might not be familiar with the OVS.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, we'll move on that later. So just looking at India then, what's the data for India? If you've read the report, you'll know, but the Indian brain goes first to the rational data. So very strong preference for rational data.
Very strong, yeah.
Not as strong on looking at the emotional data, right?
Yeah.
I can see some nods. But let's just bear that in mind. And I didn't share that I've been in India for 20+ plus years. And so I'm also focused more on rational data now. I'm moving with my environment. If we move ahead, there's another aspect of our brain styles. How do we make decisions? Where does our brain go first? So I'll just cover this quite briefly. The continuum is from evaluative to innovative. And what this means is really, how do I weigh up the costs and benefits of a decision? And essentially, do I seek to avoid risk? Do I seek to minimize risk? Whereas the innovative side, the opposite side, is much more on what's the opportunity here? What could be in this situation? And much more risk embracing or risk tolerant. So if I'm quite strongly evaluative, I'd be working pretty hard to make sure there's no errors here. I'm not going to mess up. This is going to be safe moving forward. I work hard for that. Whereas people whose brains are much more on the innovative side would be looking for novelty and change. So innovative doesn't mean I've got the capacity for creativity. It just means I'm open to change and novelty. I like the new. I'm open to explore and make decisions in that way. So people in the middle, you know, on the evaluative side, would like the status quo, are quite would be seeking stability, but they'd also flex to be open to new opportunities, and just the other way around on the innovative side. So they'd flex both ways. So in terms of endurance decision making, anyone want to take a guess? More evaluative or more innovative? Everyone, I can see people smiling and they know what the answer is. Yeah. So people are typing in saying, yes, much more evaluative. So pretty much 2/3 evaluative, but just over a third innovative. So yeah, now let's move on to the third area that our brain might focus on. Jayne, I'm passing back to you for the drive and the motivation.
Yeah, so drive is about what gets you excited, what lights your fire, what motivates you. And there is this continuum that shows on the one side is very practical about, if you're like me, you have a task list and you tick your way through and you get super excited about getting jobs done. Whereas idealistic is very big picture focused, you know, looking at the model, looking at the long term. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. You know, it's more long-term versus short-term, the here and now.
Okay, so the now versus the future, and do we pivot if we're in the middle? Okay. Okay, again, I'm going to ask you, practical or idealistic, the Indian professional's brain? I have to stress it's a professional person's brain. Oh, I think Vivek's already read the report, right? Vivek's in there. Okay. Simonetta? No guessing. Vivek's obviously evaluative because he's not going to, and he's practical, he's read the report. Oh, okay. It is actually idealistic. So this is sometimes interesting for people that might think, oh, rational, evaluative must be practical. But in fact, there's a much stronger focus on, or much stronger motivation for the future. Or what are we aiming for? This looks great in the future. And this culminates in a brain style that we call the strategist. So some of you would know the strategist is not the role of a strategist in corporate headquarters. This is just a name we give to the brain style. The strategist who looks at the rational data, or his brain goes to the rational data, brain likes to weigh things up first, and is really looking to the future. Oh, is excited by the future. So yeah, so quick, let's go to the questions. So actually, a lot of people in India are the strategists. So well over a third of people in India are strategist brain styles. So I'm going to Jayne and then I'll go to Shakti. Jayne, can you, I'll take this off the screen, but can you talk us through the strategist brain style, the opportunities and the challenges for someone with a strategist brain style, such as myself?
So just to sum it up briefly, someone who has a strategist brain style is very careful with data, has a very strong propensity to weigh things up carefully and think about, well, where are we going? Yeah, what's the long-term plan here in terms of what we need to do? So, you know, that they're great at evaluating risk. On the downside, there is a tendency to not consider both the emotions, both to self and others. And at 6 seconds, we believe emotions drive people and people therefore drive performance. And we may tend, again, because we are avoiding risk averse, to stick into our same old way of doing things. We keep on repeating our patterns of past rather than taking the risk of moving forward. So I think that's the you know, great at assessing risk, but great at, you know, having this wish for the world. How practical is the wish for myself, for my community, whatever, is a different question. Yeah, I think it's the risk of not taking into account the emotional data. And, you know, that takes us back to the core of what is emotional intelligence. It's about blending thinking and feeling to make better decisions. So if we're not weighing up both of those and are open to doing things differently, i.e. taking risks, that potentially means we get stuck in doing same old, and we know the quotation about doing that too.
No, what is that, Jayne? Okay. So yeah, so let's build on that with Shakti. So we're going to go to Shakti first. I'm just going to stop showing that so we can see Shakti nicely. Shakti, tell us, because you've worked in different types of organizations, and obviously you've worked for many years within India. So have you seen this brain style show up? And do you have any anecdotes or insights that you could share with us?
Yes. So, Andrea, I'm not surprised that this brain style showed up in your survey. It's actually quite widespread. It's pervasive. So, and I can just share with you my assessment as to, you know, why this this is happening right now. I also want to step back for a minute and say that, look, and I heard you say that the survey was carried out with professionals in urban India. It was a sample of 550 or 600 professionals in India. The point I want to state is that, look, Indian culture has traditionally been very conducive for emotional intelligence. In fact, is intrinsic to Indian culture. But it has lost its way, you know, in our relentless pursuit for becoming globally integrated as a globally integrated economy and also becoming globally competitive. So that's, you know, the observation that I have. Now, if you look at it, the reason for this, the underlying reason, and, you know, I've studied abroad. I've worked with global organizations for over 3 decades. And what I've kind of sort of, understood is that a lot has to do with our educational system. The point I'm trying to put across is that most education today is predicated on thinking rationally. You look at the business schools, you look at all the business schools in India or outside of India, you look at all the engineering departments of universities, you look at medical and law school. These are significantly based on left brain thinking and also bivalent logic. So it is, and these education systems in turn have produced systems that are also very steeped in rational thinking. So it doesn't come as a surprise to me that the survey results that your survey has kind of indicated. And I'll share with you my own experience. I worked for 33 years, across several global corporations. I worked with 2 international banks, with a global Big 4 consulting firm. And I finally spent 15 years, at at IBM. And with the partial exception of the consulting industry, most organizations today are driven by a strategist brain style because of the go get results culture. And of course, I've spent 33 years in the corporate sector, but also 5 years in the nonprofit sector. But what is very prevalent in the corporate sector is the strategist brain style, and that's got to do with objectives. And I'm saying by far and large, this would not be the case with every organization. And a strategist brain style kind of really helps in achieving short-term results. And most corporations today are driven by short-term results. And this is the philosophy that is prevailing in the industrial economy of today. So your question was also about the impact, or what are the consequences? So I feel the consequences of strategist thinking or relying lopsidedly on one faculty in our brain has been disastrous. If you look at how crisis-ridden our planet is today, you look at the Lehman Brothers crisis, you look at the myriad instances of weather and climate change, the COVID pandemic that all of us have just sort of been through. But all of these are forcing us to re-examine our mental models. They're forcing organizations to rethink the way they do business. So that's the flip side. Yeah, now, some of you may be familiar with Fritjof Capra. He's an eminent physicist and a systems thinker. And Fritjof refers to these multiple crises in aggregate as the crisis of perception. Yeah, as in that these crises are all interrelated, but our strategist thinking, our style of, our brain style, limits us to looking at these in isolation because we are driven by, very narrow short-term objectives and results. And I think the way to counter this tendency, to this analysis paralysis tendency, it starts with the realization that EQ is as important, if not more important, than IQ. And especially if you're looking for sustainable results and win-win outcomes.
Okay. So very interesting. I don't know, Jayne, if you've got a comment to what Shakti just said, because there's quite a lot on that analysis paralysis mindset and getting stuck, even though there's this kind of North Star a long, long way away, and not being able to take that step to get there. And Jayne, I did want your perception on this or your input on this. Is there an element of perfectionism in the strategist brain style that causes it to get even more stuck in a rut?
I don't think we can say every strategist is a perfectionist, but yes, there certainly might be some people who have that schema. Yeah. And I have to say that, it was really interesting listening to you, Shakti, in terms of, relating your experience to, us needing to solve the problems that exist now and the problems that we don't know of yet. And the problem with the strategist brain style, it's great for dealing with things that are here and thinking about tomorrow. But, well, we'll still keep on doing it the same old and expect we'll get there. The issue with that is and that aversion to risk possibly also limits us developing a growth mindset in exploring multiple opportunities and options that will require risk. To leap into the future, to the unknown. And I think that, this is particularly something that we need to look at in terms of our education system, because if we are educating people just to learn what is here, are we really developing the 21st century skills that are needed to develop innovation, creativity, flexibility in thinking to solve the problems that we aren't even aware of yet? Yeah. And I think that's possibly something that I was really reflecting on when I was listening to you, Shakti. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I was actually also thinking about, education is a hot button for me. But I was also wondering in recent experience, and we'll open up for questions in about 10 minutes, of a lot more innovation and a lot more investment in startups in India. And I don't know if there's been an uptick in that. I'd be interested what other people think there. So question for Shakti first. If the strategist brain style isn't too helpful at times, you know, overall, just having a strategist brain style in addressing our very serious problems that we're facing, climate change being a very, very obvious one. What's the antidote? What do you suggest for people who may recognize that they have this brain style? What would you suggest for them?
So I ended my last answer by saying that a good starting point is a recognition that you know, that you have a particular brain style. I think that's a very good starting point. I'm not even sure everybody knows their own brain style, but your question is going further. So I'm going to build up on your question. I mean, on the previous answer that I gave to you. So I think what people also need to understand is what's really missing. Yeah, if you have a particular brain style, and I think Jayne also spoke about the opportunities, you know, of you know, having different styles. So, and I think organizations like 6 Seconds can really help people become self-aware. You know, so knowing yourself is essential. And if people don't know themselves, then I'm not sure there's any hope. So you got to start with, you know, encouraging people to get to know themselves. And I think the work that you do is commendable because it just helps people in that realization. And I'm going to come back to, you know, this point a little later in our session today, because I myself have just done an evaluation of a 6 Seconds evaluation, right? So when I took the evaluation, you know, the 6 Seconds EQ evaluation, it threw up an inventor brain style for me, but bordering on a strategist brain style. So I am at the border between an inventor and a strategist. Now, what is common between the inventor and the strategist is that both are driven by rational data, and they're both idealistic in, you know, in their long-term outlook, their future vision. But the stark difference between the two is that the strategist decision-making is evaluative, whereas the inventor's decision-making is innovative and seeks opportunities. So notwithstanding, yeah, I mean, notwithstanding whatever I've said, I can candidly say, you know, that I have worked on projects in the last 6 months, and I have not succeeded on some vital projects only because I have relied extensively on rational data. So this webinar is very timely because it's also given me a chance to, you know, sort of reflect and introspect. And in, you know, a key project that I was working on, I ignored processing emotional data. And, you know, on reflection, when I look back, you know, my failure was attributed to this lack of balance. So I think what one really needs to do is first get to know yourself before you start working on others.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you.
Well said. Well said. And thank you for pitching the 6 Seconds approach, Shakti. Just to make it known to everybody, he's not being paid.
Jayne, do you have anything to add?
Definitely not being paid. I'm here because Andrea is a collaborator and a very good friend, and she invited me to be a part of this session. Yeah.
Do I have anything to add?
Yeah.
No, I think that Shakti has summed it up really well, and I appreciate that, because him not being directly in the 6 Seconds network, it's just so interesting to hear a very different opinion and still understand how valuable. And we all say, you know, the starting point is know yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And recognizing that your brain style is your preference. However, you have the ability to flex the muscles across those continuums. And you know, I was reflecting on the fact, Shakti, that you said you've been involved in some projects recently. And it took my brain then to our change map, and how so often change and the projects we work on fail because people take this very rational approach to, we're going to do this, then we'll do this, then we'll do this. And they completely discount that ultimately change depends on people, and people are emotional. And change has almost become a dirty word. And when the brain hears dirty words, it goes, nope, I don't want to do it. So, you know, if I'm a strategist or I have an inkling towards being a strategist, when I hear you have to change, my brain is going to go more and more into my strategist brain style, and I'm going to put my feet in, and I don't want to change. Yeah. So, yeah, interesting. I was just connecting what you were saying to the brain style.
But thank you. Look, now we're just going to share one other bit of information, which is actually what kickstarted my interest in diving deeper into EQ in India, because we see lots of data from, obviously from the US. We do see a lot of data from the US, but I hadn't seen much data specifically on India, and because of the wealth of data that 6 Seconds had, I worked with Jayne and team to do that survey and get this data. But what kicked it off was in one session with Jayne, she said, oh, this propensity in India, I don't have the hard evidence, but I think there's a very strong brain style of strategist, but also there's an absolutely huge ability to think through things, to weigh things up. So in 6 Seconds terminology, it is to apply consequential thinking. So I'm just sharing the graph. This is only 2 data points. And if you know 6 Seconds, you will know that there's 8 competencies in the 6 Seconds know yourself, choose yourself, give yourself model. But this is the one that always, to me, is a trigger. And that's why I say the EQ paradox, because there's this world-leading ability to think through consequentially the costs and benefits of a decision, right? The evaluative data, if you will, of the brain style, which absolutely dwarfs the ability to navigate emotions. So navigate emotions is that emotional data, what's happening with me, what am I feeling, how do I use this energy to work through this situation or this decision I've got to make, right? So I've got this amazing ability to use my thinking power and look at rational data, but I'm leaving, this is how I describe it, and Jayne can correct me, I'm leaving this chunk of really valuable data untouched, this emotional data that I'm not looking into, and I'm not using that analytical ability to think, well, what's going on here? Why am I feeling this? What does it, why is this feeling come up? How's it trying to help me? Is it helpful? What do I want to do with this emotion? How do I work through it? So this is always like it smacks me in the face when I see this, like 14-point difference between ability to think through things and ability to work through that emotional data. So let's go to Jayne. This is our pattern. Let's go to Jayne. Why is this? I mean, I've shared why this always hits me, and I think what a waste of analytical ability. But you tell us, Jayne, from your perspective, talk us through this.
So both of these competencies that we're seeing there fall into the choose yourself, a pursuit of our model, which is about self-management, about the way we show up, the way we choose to show up. Yeah. And when we look at this, the immediate thing is relate back to brain style. We have a very strong rational focus, i.e., our ability to perceive and process and get the data and use the data from emotions is where that navigate emotions comes into, to a certain extent, apply consequential thinking. So when we apply consequential thinking, we are weighing up the pros and cons of our decision. And again, we were very high on the evaluative side. So we're weighing up the pros and cons, short-term, long-term, maybe more long-term than short-term, and on a rational side, but maybe not so much taking into account the emotional side to self and others. Yeah. So we're very good at applying consequential thinking. And as I say, that really showed up in the brain style as well. So the strength in apply consequential thinking, things that people have a considerable strength in evaluating risk, considerable strength in a risk. And they have that ability to pause and assess the pros and cons. And maybe sometimes the pause goes on for a little too long. So this actually, when it comes to risk, when it comes to making hardcore strategic decisions, this is a great strength to have. And I could certainly do more of it, have more of it, because I tend to jump in and think afterwards. But it can delay decision making and proactivity. Yeah. And that may be the cause of it, problems in terms of moving ahead. And sometimes people call it procrastination. Navigating emotions is essentially a skill for shifting from volatility by using our emotions as a strategic resource, because we don't really think of emotions as being a strategic resource. But emotions, as you said, is this huge bundle of data. Are people leaning in? Or are they leaning away? If this decision is going to be made, am I going to be enthusiastically following it, or am I going to be withdrawing from it and doing as little as I can do, or even upsetting the apple cart? The very low score here shows that people generally struggle to use emotions in a productive way. Yeah. So the tendency, I believe culturally, is that people suppress emotions. They feel them because we all feel emotions, but how are we using them? We ignore them and potentially suppress them. And, if we take this into account, considering that predominant brain style that has a rational evaluative focus, the paradox is that whilst there's a cultural bias towards weighing up pros and cons, we're doing that with a rational focus without regard for the emotions that are in or potentially lie outside that decision. Yeah. And again, I go back to, if we believe that emotions drive people and people drive performance, this is a really risky place to be sitting in.
Yeah. I mean, this is world leading and world lagging, these two scores. So Shakti, now thinking of as a system, it's not just individuals as a system. Obviously, we've got a system that's working for us, but we're part of a bigger system. How does this impact our all-round performance or effectiveness or success? I mean, what do you take from this information?
Thanks, Andrea. I just want to first build up on what I just heard Jayne saying. And one of the things that I wanted to share, an insight that I wanted to offer, I think it's not that people are not able to navigate their emotions, but they're not able to do it quick enough, or as to the way the situation demands. It's post facto, after the event has happened, after the problem has taken place, as an example. So I think, to me, that is the real paradox. It's being able to not just use it, but use it in a timely fashion. Yeah, and for me, I'm still on a learning curve, so I don't have all the answers, but I feel that is the real paradox. Now, to come to your question, what you just asked me is that what we need to understand is that all individuals, all of us on this call today, and all organizations are living systems. And we have to move away from a paradigm, which puts people as resources, and move away to another paradigm where we bring out the innate potential of people to be resourceful. So people as resources is quite different from people being resourceful. And I think that's what we really need to sort of work on. And to me, the impact of this divide, the divide that you have just presented, between applied consequential thinking and navigating our emotions, it means that there will be several lost opportunities, on the way. But the good news is that, these competencies are something that can be corrected, that they can be brought into balance. And I have worked with several systems thinkers who possess both skills in equal measure. I've been a student of Professors Derek and Laura Cabrera at Cornell University, and they speak a lot about this balance. So I think that's it's there. It's just that it's everyone's not fully aware of it, that there are ways and means of bringing out this balance. The final thing I want to say is that, look, in every organization, whether it's a business organization or it's political or it's religious or any sort of organization, each organizations have a dual aspect. Yeah, on one hand, they are social institutions. They have been designed for a specific, purpose and to meet a particular objective. At the same time, these formal structures, also house a lot of informal communities and networks of people. And it is crucial that each one of us understands the interplay between the formal and informal networks. But relying on just rational data alone and not being able to navigate, emotions doesn't help you in understanding that interplay. So, and the fact is that in reality, you have both, the stated and the non-stated, the obvious and the unobvious.
Mm-hmm.
So bringing about a balance in our talents, in our competencies, our faculties can help us transcend this duality and achieve extraordinary outcomes that are creative and long lasting. So that is what I feel is what needs to be done.
Mm.
I think the other thing that comes from this a propensity to apply consequential thinking with a low navigate emotions is an element of frustration. Yeah. And frustration it's an interesting emotion because frustration can move us forward. Like, hey, I want to get out, I want to do something to get out of here and find new ways of doing things. But frustration can also be an away emotion. It can say, well, I'll sod that. I'm going to give up. So it's an interesting one to have. And also that low ability to navigate emotions, if it is suppression or volatility on either, it could be either, if someone's not navigating, can have a dire effect on well-being. Yeah. In terms of people's, mental and physical well-being. So I think that's, something we don't have time to explore, but that's something else that needs to be taken into account when we discount emotions.
Yeah,
That's a great point, Jayne, what you just brought out about, health and well-being, so thank you for bringing that out.
Yeah, so well-being, the balance in our system, the balance between what we're thinking and what we're feeling and blending both. So we're coming full circle now to what Jayne started off with in terms of the definition. I am going to stop sharing. I'm going to ask, are there any questions or any comments or observations? So when I share this data about the apply consequential thinking and the navigate emotions, I often ask people in India, talk me through it. What's that all about? So I've got interesting answers there, but I'm curious, any questions for Jayne and Shakti on anything at all? I mean, Kevin did ask a difficult question, and I'm conscious that not everyone knows the 6 seconds models, which was, does systems thinking correlate well with any particular brain style or vice versa? I don't know if you've got a perspective. I'd have to go to Jayne for that. Do you have a perspective on that?
I think we need to go to Shakti. I mean, Shakti, you don't have to name the brain style, but where would you put the ideal systems thinker on those 3 strands? Would it be you in terms of rational, innovative, and idealistic, or would it be sitting somewhere else? What do you think? We're putting you on the spot
Sorry,
now.
Shakti.
Sure. So it's a good question, and I'm trying to answer it in my context, right? I'm trying to apply it to myself. And as you know, my 6 seconds results showed that I'm a strategist. So maybe I'm not a very good systems thinker, but I'm aspiring to be a good systems thinker because I believe in what it has to offer. And I also realize that, and we've had this discussion before, that the emotional intelligence is a state. It's at a point of time. And this can change over a period of time, right? So I think the answer to Kevin's question is what brain style? I think it firstly has to be a combination, because a good systems thinker, and I see that in myself, I have a combination of both, left and right brain. And by the way, incidentally, I've also done an HVDI diagnostic many, many years ago. So I'm building up on that. So I think you need really a combination of, of both, of, brain styles on both sides of our faculty. So I think the ones that would work best for a systems thinker would be a scientist and an inventor, and also someone who is, a sage and a
Come on,
guardian.
give
You
the
can't have
deliverer.
everything,
Oh,
Shakti.
come on, we need deliverers to get it done, Shakti.
Well, systems thinkers are not always good at getting things done. They're good at showing the way, getting it's yeah. So I would say call out scientist, inventor, a guardian, and a sage. I would call these four styles. It's
Oh.
very tough to to have an amalgam of all of these. But since that's the question you asked me, I'm giving you the answer to the question that you posed.
I
Okay,
think you're
Jayne,
making
yeah.
the case for a balanced team.
Yes.
And that's what we say. You actually, and also the ability of people in strategic or key positions to increase their cognitive flexibility.
Yes, definitely.
Jane's just disappointed the deliverer is not in there. So sorry, we're getting very 6 seconds oriented here. Yeah, so any other questions? Otherwise, I'll rephrase one question that came up. Any questions for Shakti or
So
Jayne?
Kevin has made a comment, but it's a question in the comment, and I'll read it out. Thanks, but not sure most organizations work in isolation. They don't think about the impact on the end user, rather implement processes to help the department rather than the organization. So Kevin's comment, and Kevin, maybe feel free to jump in, because you say, thanks, not sure that most organizations work in isolation. So are you saying that you feel otherwise, that you feel that organizations, do not work in isolation? I just want to make sure I've understood. You are refuting that point.
Yeah, hi. No, that was a comment that I made previously. What I meant was that thanks for taking my comment. I think that most organizations do work in isolation that I work with. So
Okay.
so they only do things. They build processes and procedures to complement their purpose in the department.
Okay, got it.
Then they don't really think about the overall big picture.
Right. Then your comment corroborates what I said. But when I read your first sentence, I thought you were refuting what I said. But now you
No, I agree with you.
Yeah. So, and you also had a question about that OVS could provide great data, but I don't know what OVS stands for.
Jayne will be able to tell you, I think. Jayne is the expert.
I think that's a question for another time, Kevin.
Another time. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, the question, the OVS would enable us to look at the organization as a living system, in terms of what Shakti was saying, because it's the OVS Shakti is an organizational climate survey. So we're looking at, the collective feeling within the organization and how that's driving specific outcomes. So yeah, maybe something interesting for you to learn more about.
Yeah, I'm really interested with system thinking and EQ. I just started reading about systems thinking. It happened after I did this OVS, vital signs survey with an organization where, there was low customer focus for the organization. And when you dig deep into it, you see that the reason for this is people work in isolation. So, the marketing department is struggling because the manufacturing don't actually, complement, what they have to show to the customer. Then the finance department don't support that. So they don't talk to each other. They don't look at the bigger picture. And, I can see the correlation beautifully between EQ and systems thinking, and the need for EQ in systems thinking.
Yeah, I'm not sure you could be a systems thinker without EQ, could you? Because then you're missing part of the system. Shakti's saying nothing. Shakti is just in his guru state.
No, was that a question to me,
Well,
Andrea?
it's just.
Oh, I
could
thought you were
could-
responding to Kevin.
Yeah, I am, but I thought you might pipe up. But yeah, I was thinking about the emotions within an organization and are the processes enabling the expression or the utilization of EQ. And given many people in India have got that strategist brain style, or is it just too much? This is the data, and even though we might not have that brain style that looks first at emotions, they are definitely there, as you've both been saying, and we do need to take that data into account. Any final question? Because I'm conscious of the time, and I appreciate everyone's attention and the wonderful insights from Jayne and Shakti. And I hope you've enjoyed the EQ systems thinking, and that's provoked some thought. Any questions? Final question? Everyone's bowled over by the insights and the data, and they're just in the Zen state. So I would then wrap up and I'd say thank you so much, Jayne. Thank you so much for being the beacon of EQ that shines across our region. Thank you so much for that. And thank you, Shakti, for your for diving into EQ and making the connections with systems thinking, and also sharing the insights that it provoked for you. And we all know EQ, anything we look at is a snapshot. What we work on, we can change. So,
Yeah.
Andrea, I call it the EQ systems thinking dance.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Shakti, there I'm thinking of you sort of dancing along those continuums, is wonderful. But Shakti, it's been really interesting having this conversation with you, because
Yes. And likewise, Jayne.
a different angle and is illuminating. And I just want to say a big thank you to Andrea. I mean, she did a great piece of research, and if you've not, to any of you listening, if you've not seen her report, I'm sure you can. It's somewhere, I can't remember where it is, but she did a really great report. And it's available to share and use if you are working and in the Indian area of the Indian region. So well done.
It's in the chat, guys, if you want to, or just do a search 6 seconds EQ in India and it'll come up. So thank you everyone for joining. The recording
Yes,
will be available.
Thank you all.
I'll share the link.
Yeah, I would be really grateful to you, Andrea, if you can share the recording so I can share it out in our groups, because I think there's been a lot of food for thought in this. So those of you who were able to join, thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Great conversation.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Simonetta.
Thank you, and bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye for
you.
now.